News of alleged ceasefire negotiations between the government of Cameroon and separatist leaders have been raising reactions across the board. Though many have called the move a laudable one, they are however calling for the execution of preliminary actions before meaningful discussions take place. Tonight we hear from Professor Claude Abe, who is a sociologist based in Yaoundé, and John Ako, a political commentator. They spoke to our reporter Catherine Kone. And 300 Cameroonians have been elected in France in the recent municipal elections which took place in that country. The milestone victory for Cameroonians resident in France will be a focus in tonight's newscast as we weigh in on the significance of such a political victory. Those are top stories. Spectrum Television welcoming you back from the weekend. Good evening and thanks for joining us. You're watching the primetime newscast on STV. Just as we told you in the headlines, news of alleged discussions between the government of Cameroon and separatist leaders over a possible ceasefire has been raising reactions across the board. Though many have lauded the move, they are calling for some preliminary actions to be taken before meaningful discussions could start. Our reporter Catherine Kone spoke to Professor Claude Abe, a sociologist, and John Ako, a political commentator, and now presents their views in this report.
With alleged ceasefire talks between separatist fighters and the government of Cameroon, Professor Claude Abe, a sociologist, thinks a successful negotiation cannot be carried out with life sentences detainees.
I can have two major sentiments. The first sentiment is that there were very important time who have lost by Cameroonian before choosing this pacific way to solve this crisis. And the second sentiment is to address the issue of the sincerity of government and the sincerity of this opening of negotiation. When we take in account that Mr. Ayub Tabe is always in prison, and then in my point of view, this kind of negotiation is very critical in my point of view.
John Ako, a civil society on his part, says the government should adhere to the demands of the leaders for the release of all those arrested.
The law itself knows that a free being is better off than somebody whose mind is in chains. There are other what we call the presumption of innocence, and under which the principle of good faith can be violated. That such a mind should be free from any equity. That for you to negotiate with an individual, that the two minds must meet in one called consensus ad idem. This consensus must be free from fraud, from misrepresentation, duress, or undue influence. As these people behind bars are really under any form of duress, if the law applies in the positive, then they might not have had the mandate to negotiate or do anything within this line.
However, the alleged ceasefire talks between the Naira 10 and the government has caused controversies between the separatist leaders who think Seseko Ayok Tabe and Co. are not in any position to negotiate for a lasting solutions to the ongoing crisis in the northwest and southwest region. They maintain that no prisoner can negotiate for free men.
Now, the alleged ceasefire talks are taking place at a time when the crisis in the northwest and southwest regions continue to deepen, despite the holding of the major national dialogue and several appeasement measures from the government and the head of state. Several people have died in their thousands, while others have been left as refugees and internally displaced persons, not living out properties that have been destroyed. In the following report, John Paul Sama revisits the genesis of this episode of the Anglophone crisis.
October 2016 witnessed protests by teachers and lawyers in the northwest and southwest regions, with these common law lawyers and Anglophone teachers leading the cause for diverse reasons. The common law lawyers were not satisfied with the fact that courtrooms in these two regions were dominated by French magistrates and also wanted a translation of the Ohada text into the Queen's language. The teachers, on their part, were clamoring for the protection of the English language in their educational system. This led to violent clashes with security forces in some instances, leaving casualties along the way and a sit-in strike called. The outlawed consortium, made up of teachers and lawyers, led by some prominent figures like Barrister Agbobala, Tasang and others, met in several occasions in Bamenda with the former Prime Minister before their arrest, with some on the run. The peaceful strike launched by the teachers and lawyers soon turned into a conflict with demands for secession and federalism as violence began erupting and the birth of armed groups. A few months later, the leader of the separatist movement, Nsoesie Ayuk-Tabe and co. were arrested in neighboring Nigeria and sent to Cameroon, where they stood trial and sentenced to life imprisonment in 2019. As a result of the escalating crisis in the northwest and southwest regions, several persons flee these zones to other regions of the country, while some who weren't killed went into the bushes. At this time, international bodies like the United Nations, the European Union and the African Union have been clamoring for dialogue to solve this problem, with Switzerland opting to mediate talks between the government and separatist leaders in order to come to a definite solution. The government, on their part, after having made some reforms in the country's judicial sector, like the creation of a common law bench at the Supreme Court and others, called for the major national dialogue. A move which was seen as the first major step from them to sit on the same table, chaired by Prime Minister Joseph John Gute, bringing together some of the key actors where certain recommendations were arrived at, one of which is the special status granted to these regions. Despite all these, the crisis still persists in the two English-speaking regions of the country, as negotiations are said to have been opened between the government and the separatist leaders.
The Cameroon Army says that it has rehabilitated the Oku-Kombo road in the northwest region, which was in the hands of separatist fighters for over 2 years. According to a statement from the Defense and Security Forces, the operation was supervised by Colonel Shah Aleng Matuin, commander of the 51st Motorized Infantry Battalion. The soldiers neutralized 13 separatist fighters and destroyed 16 camps of the separatists. The army also reveals that they lost a soldier and 3 more were wounded. The road has now been cleared and opened to the public. Now, the national coordinator of the presidential plan for the reconstruction and development of the northwest and southwest regions has rounded off his 2-week awareness and sensitization tour in the northwest and southwest regions of the country. Paul Tasong ended in Boya, where he was discussing with stakeholders for 5 days, at the end of which he granted a press conference over the weekend. The main points in this report.
The 2-week awareness and sensitization tour of the national coordinator of the presidential plan to reconstruct and develop the northwest and southwest regions has produced one big lesson, that the reconstruction must start from the mind. Paul Tasong spelled this out at the press conference to close his mission in Boya on Friday.
The key objectives of the plan is to, to mix that cement once more. To pour a bit more water in the cement and ensure that beyond constructing houses and roads and what have you, we're also consolidating the foundation, which is the social cohesion, which is fundamental and important for us to move forward as a community.
The plan is people-centered, but it is available only to those who believe in peace.
It's demand-driven. It is demand-driven for obvious reasons. Those who will be benefiting from the plan as individuals have to first of all believe in it. The plan has as ultimate objective to fast-track the return to peace in the two regions. And when you talk about peace, you are talking about the softening of the hearts of people. So If you believe in peace, if you believe that the so far destroyed social cohesion can be mended, then you step up to the plate.
The population of the Northwest and Southwest regions must key into their vision, and for it to be a resounding success, the media must come on board.
The objective of the press conference is simple. Where possible, complete the information received by our respected ladies and gentlemen of the media. Ensure that all the edges are rounded up to enable them relay the information as it should be. We believe strongly that their enhanced understanding and information of the plan will definitely go a long way to answer all the questions, if not most of the questions, still hanging in the mind.
After meeting with delegates from the 13 divisions of the two restive regions, the Reconstruction and Development team will hand over a report to the Prime Minister for onwards action.
A plenary sitting on a general debate over two bills amending and supplementing some provisions of the law on freedom of association and regulating artistic and cultural associations in the country is unfolding at the Yaoundé Conference Center at the moment. Chairing the proceedings is the Senate President Marcel Niat Jifenji. The two bills had been adopted at the National Assembly last week and were defended by the Ministers of Territorial Administration and that of Culture. We just have information that Paul Atanganji has ended his defense of the bill on freedoms of association at the Senate. And the Minister of Finance says that Parliament and the government must work together to ensure that the budgetary orientation debate becomes an excellent tool for the modernization of Cameroon's public finance. Louis-Paul Moutaze made the call while presenting the guidelines of the medium-term economic and budgetary programming document for the year 2021 to 2023 to members of the Budget and Finance Committee of the National Assembly. The document, which serves as a framework for the preparation of the 2021 state budget, will be up for debate in Parliament this week. About 300 Cameroonians, as we told you in the headlines, have been elected into councils in the French Republic. Josephine Benzi tells us that this milestone is a paradigm shift in today's politics, that race is not a function of a good leadership. Her report.
About 300 French nationals of Cameroonian origin have been elected to municipal councils since the last election. A number almost equivalent to that of the previous mandate, but the novelty this time is that an increasing number of these elected officials are assuming functions of deputy mayor or delegated municipal councillors. Despite the defeat of some of those who held these positions, including Pierre de Gaëtan Jikam in Bordeaux or Caroline Adomo in Champigny, and the departure of Roger Chateau, who was full mayor of Bonny, new figures emerged like Patrice Ondua in Montrouge, Geneviève Kaljob in Metz, and more remarkably, Arnaud Ngacha in Paris, alongside Anne Hidalgo. The House of Cameroonians in France, coordinating a meeting with the Association of Elected Officials of Cameroonian origin last year, had expressed the wish that this development would foster a more marked interest in those elected for questions related to work and the duty to remember the decentralized territorial cooperation and tinsel the relationship of the past between France and Cameroon. The elections of our compatriots in France constitute an amazing shift as more women are being empowered. They must realize that the world is a global village where only merit and competence could dictate public action. If France took account of race and region of origin, Anne Hidalgo and Anamba Onana would never have been mayors in France. Nicolas Sarkozy would never have been president of the French Republic. Further from France, Barack Obama would never be president of the United States of America. As far as elections are concerned,
Only the people have the last word through universal suffrage.
A similar number of persons, this time pupils advocates, have been sworn into the Cameroon Bar Association today. The pupils advocates have taken their oath of their profession at the Littoral Court of Appeal this Monday. The oath-taking ceremony marks a turning point in the career of the young lawyers, as they now have the legal authorization to operate within the Cameroon legal jurisdiction. Let's have the reaction of two newly inducted pupils advocates into the Cameroon Bar Association.
I'm very happy. Today is the memorable day. I'm very happy that finally, after years upon years, me have been a people advocate for years, for close to 10 years. But today, they have sworn me in. I'm very, very happy.
Members of the Parliamentary Network for the Promotion of Entrepreneurship have met at the Yaoundé Conference Center today to discuss their plan of action for the year 2020. The president of the network, Honorable Roger Melingi, has challenged his colleagues to intensify their actions on the field by assisting and training youths on the creation of startups and small businesses in the country. Women in less privileged communities in the Littoral region have been the subject or have been beneficiaries of a cancer campaign which took place over the weekend in Douala. The goal of the cervical cancer campaign, supported by the Douala Trade Council, is to raise awareness on the disease, which has so far claimed the life of about 5,000 women in the last 6 months. Josephine Binzi has more.
According to the American Cancer Society for 2020, about 13,800 new cases of cervical cancer have been diagnosed, and about 4,290 women so far have died of the disease since January 2020. This has been the strong motivation of Dr. Samuel, who has sensitized women in communities in Douala on the importance of early diagnosis and vaccination of the silent disease.
We have this campaign against cervical cancer, which is a killer disease, and most women in the rural areas are not even aware of it, not to talk of going to do the things they're supposed to do, like screening and vaccination against it.
Free screening for proper diagnosis as well as vaccination is a measured tool the organization is using to target less privileged women, as the presence of cervical cancer in our society cannot go unnoticed.
When we do that and we get, for example, we get a patient that has the cervical cancer, maybe pre-cancer, we will treat. According to WHO regional director, he says cervical cancer is the greatest threat to the life of women globally. And in every 2 minutes, a woman dies of the disease. That alone makes it a center of focus for somebody that really cares about the life of people.
He further explains various strategies our African societies can use to boot out the virulent disease.
Trick here is the fact that they sensitize their people, they screen them, and then they vaccinate them. So when they do all that, they eliminate the disease. And WHO director is the plan, the 2030, the millennium goal is to say by the 2030 we should be able to reduce cervical cancer.
According to the World Health Organization, cervical cancer is the greatest threat to women's health globally. The awareness scheme took place from July 2 to July 4, targeting to sensitize less privileged women and in the weeks ahead, save lives and those who already live with the pathology.
The 24th edition of the Écran Noir Film Festival, initially scheduled from the 11th to the 18th of July 2020, will now hold in October this year. This information was disclosed by the promoter and general delegate of the major film festival. Crystal Asexuele reports.
The suspense is over around the annual rendezvous of professionals and artists of the Seven Earth that host a wide variety of African producers and directors of film production of the Central African region and the diaspora, known as the Écran Noir Festival, initially scheduled to take place from July 11 to 18, postponed due to the coronavirus health crisis that has literally put the world on its knee. October 31 to November 7 are the new dates made public by its Delegate General and promoter Basek Bakobio in an online video press conference on July 2, 2020.
This health crisis is mainly what led us to postpone the 24th edition of Festival Écran Noir, which we nevertheless want to organize this year because we have been working since then to prepare the festivities of 25th anniversary next year in 2021.
This change in dates also affects the deadline of film submission as well as the form of the festival, which have been reviewed depending on the evolution of the coronavirus pandemic, as explains the Delegate General.
So, as we report the festival plan to November, to the 31 of 31st to the 31st of October to the 7th of November, the deadline for submitting the films for selection also will be reported. Hélène Eba and her crew will receive a film until August 30. Écran Noir will be done in one of the following three possible forms. A classic format, if the pandemic is over and if the boundaries are opened. A semi-classic form, joining virtual for international audience, international participant, and semi-face-to-face compliance with barrier measure, absolutely, for Cameroonians. Or, the first possibility, a total virtual form.
A new category has been introduced into the list of competitions due to popular demand. The introduction of the web series competition is an innovation this year, which for a start will be limited only to Cameroonians.
On the express demand of my younger brother and friend Rock Patudem, he asked me, and I think he was right, the introduction of a web series competition for Cameroonian only this year, Next year we will extend that competition to other African countries, but this year it will only be for Cameroonians. Also because there is a lack of directing in those web series, there will be a training session will be delivered to the directors of web series to help them to learn how to do it.
Film crisis, cinema in crisis, the COVID-19, and the opportunities to reinvent African cinema is the theme chosen for the 24th edition of Écran Noir Festival. The Delegate General, in his release, paid tribute to the victims of the coronavirus and praised the memory of professionals in cinema who were swept away by this pandemic.
Supervisors of over 135 youths who have benefited from the special youth plan of the head of state President Paul Biya are being trained to better follow up the recipients under them. This is to ensure that the objectives of the presidential plan is strictly followed to the letter for maximum results. John Paul Sama reports.
In a bid to properly accompany youths get access to the special youth plan, the Ministry of Youth Affairs and Civic Education, through her various delegations, has opened regional training sessions to empower those who are going to be teachers of these youths.
Before you give the supply at the young boys and girls in the PTS program, we have to be sure that morally they are ready to take this program on the field. Morally, and they have the spirit of entrepreneurs before they go to the field, so that we will not have the issue of other programs, as we know, with success until now cannot be evaluated.
Given that the project of the head of state comes with a huge financial sponsorship package of 102 billion francs CFA, it is imperative that this program be well mastered by the administrators.
This is a training session before putting supplies in the hand of young boys and young girls. That is why this training session has been program scheduled by the Minister of Youth and Civic Education.
The youth and trainers on their part see this as a means which will really make the Cameroonian youth be independent.
Out of the country, U.S. President Donald Trump has spent the 4th of July weekend celebrations at Independence Day in South Dakota and Washington. He has used both independence celebrations to deliver a strong message on law and order, the platform that his campaign is focusing ahead of the November elections. Details with the VOA.
A celebration of America's independence above Mount Rushmore, in front of a crowd of thousands, most not wearing masks. President Donald Trump delivered a dark and somber speech presenting a re-election campaign platform focused on law and order to rally his supporters against what he calls the new far-left fascism.
We will expose this dangerous movement, protect our nation's children, end this radical assault, and preserve our beloved American way of life.
Trump's visit to this giant monument of past American presidents came after months of Black Lives Matter protests and as his administration clamped down on protesters who want to remove statues of figures who supported slavery and white supremacy. He delivered a strong rebuke of what he called the cancel culture against the country's heritage.
This monument will never be desecrated. These heroes will never be defaced. Their legacy will never, ever be destroyed. Their achievements will never be forgotten. And Mount Rushmore will stand forever as an eternal tribute to our forefathers and to our freedom.
So the fact that he's going to Mount Rushmore is basically trying to say to his base audience, hey, if you don't like what's happening with all these monuments, I'm going to go to the biggest and most immovable monument there is, and I'm going to claim it as my own.
In a speech that some have called divisive, Trump portrayed the left as an angry mob that incites chaos and steers the country towards totalitarianism.
We will not be tyrannized, we will not be demeaned, and we will not be intimidated by bad, evil people.
The us versus them speech came as Trump trails in political surveys, further behind his Democratic campaign rival, former Vice President Joe Biden. Nationally, in key battleground states, and even in traditionally conservative strongholds like Missouri and Texas.
Right now, his campaign is a dumpster fire. And I say that not just because of the polls, but because there are Republicans who are vocally opposed to him.
A National Pew Research poll shows Trump 10 percentage points behind Biden. In 2016, Trump managed to beat Hillary Clinton despite her lead in the polls.
There's still a lot of time between now and the election, and 2020, if anything, has shown itself to be a rather tumultuous year. But at present, the president certainly, I think, has a lot to worry about, and it looks like an uphill climb for him.
As new coronavirus cases surpass 50,000 daily, and despite health officials urging Americans to scale back 4th of July celebrations this year, Trump also held a Salute to America event at the White House. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News.
Whose names have etched on our monuments and memorials.
And that wraps up this edition of the Primetime Newscast on STV. Thank you very much for watching. More news comes up at 8 p.m. in the French language. From the entire team, have a good night. Bye-bye.